In the freezing waters of the North Sea near Fedje, Norway, a high-stakes undersea cat-and-mouse game began on February 9, 1945. The German submarine U-864, a long-range Type IXD2 boat, commanded by Korvettenkapitän Ralf-Reimar Wolfram, moved through dangerous coastal passages under strict secrecy. Its mission carried strategic weight, with a cargo Berlin believed could influence the war in the Pacific. But the boat was in trouble. A failing, vibrating engine grew loud enough to risk exposing its position. Nearby, the British V-class submarine HMS Venturer, commanded by Lieutenant James Launders, had been tipped off and was searching for a target it couldn't yet see. For hours, both submarines maneuvered in a tense underwater standoff as Launders used hydrophone checks to follow the steady pulse of the German engines. U-864 pushed for open water and the Atlantic, while Venturer waited for the exact moment to strike, setting up a clash that would stretch the limits of detection and submarine warfare. The Type IXD2 class, U-864, among its most advanced examples, was Germany's peak long-range U-boat design. As the war became truly global, the Kriegsmarine needed U-cruisers that could stay at sea for months, support monsoon group operations in the Indian Ocean, and preserve strategic links with Imperial Japan. By 1943, when U-864 was being built at Deschimag AG Weser in Bremen, Allied radar and anti-submarine tactics were turning the Atlantic battle against the U-boats, pushing German engineers toward larger boats with greater endurance, speed, and cargo capacity. U-864 was far bigger than the standard Type 7. Its enlarged double hull carried the fuel required for extreme-range missions and provided additional internal storage, space that mattered for its final assignment. A crew of roughly 60 operated a demanding propulsion setup. Two main MAN diesel engines augmented by two auxiliary diesels for economical cruising and battery charging, a configuration meant to maximize range without constantly stressing the primary engines. On paper, the IXD2 could cross oceans at sustained surface speed and, in theory, reach the Pacific from occupied Europe without refueling. Its weapons fit a long-range cruiser role, 6 torpedo tubes with a substantial torpedo load. But the late war reality forced a shift in priorities. As Allied air patrols dominated the transit routes, deck gun surface fighting gave way to heavier anti-aircraft protection, reflecting that survival increasingly depended on enduring aerial surveillance as much as attacking shipping. Technologically, U-864 carried late-war survival tools. The snorkel for running diesels at periscope depth, improved hydrophones for underwater tracking, and a radar warning receiver to detect Allied emissions. These systems were vital because U-864's purpose went beyond combat. Under Operation Caesar, it was assigned to deliver high-value cargo to Japan, including large quantities of liquid mercury and sensitive aircraft-related materials tied to advanced German jet technology. Keel laying began on October 15, 1942. The boat was launched in August 1943 and commissioned on December 9, 1943. After training and trials with the 4th Flotilla in the Baltic, U-864 was transferred to the 33rd Flotilla in late 1944, entering frontline transport duty as Germany's strategic situation collapsed, making the submarine a high-risk attempt to keep the Axis alliance connected across vast oceans. Korvettenkapitän Ralf-Reimar Wolfram was chosen to command U-864, one of Germany's most secret and high-risk submarine missions. The Korvettenkapitän was a naval officer rank in the Nazi German Navy, equivalent to lieutenant commander or major depending on the system. He was born on March 31, 1912, in Wilhelmshaven, a major German naval town. He joined the Navy in April 1930, back when it was still called the Kriegsmarine, and trained as part of the Crew 30 officer intake. Those early years shaped him into a strict, detail-focused officer with strong habits from the surface fleet. For more than a decade, Wolfram served on surface ships before moving to submarines. He worked on torpedo boats such as Wolf and Iltis, fast vessels that demanded sharp handling and quick decisions in the tight waters of the North and Baltic Seas. By the start of the war in 1939, he was already an experienced surface officer. He switched to the U-boat force in mid-1942, later than many famous early war commanders. Germany was losing trained U-boat leaders and needed proven officers, so men like Wolfram were brought in. After intensive submarine training, he received his first U-boat command in late 1942, U-108, a long-range Type IXD2. In spring 1943, he led a combat patrol and sank the British merchant ship Robert Gray, about 8,100 tons. He didn't become a top-scoring ace, but his performance was seen as solid and reliable under pressure. That reliability made him a strong fit for a more sensitive job. On December 9, 1943, Wolfram took command of the newly commissioned U-864, a Type IXD2 built for long-range transport and special missions, not routine hunting patrols. He now had to manage a complex four-engine system and the added burden of carrying secret cargo and specialist personnel. Through 1944, he oversaw long trials and training in the Baltic to prepare the boat and crew for its real task. On June 1, 1944, he was promoted to Korvettenkapitän. He was known as formal but respected, and especially careful with procedures, important on a submarine with difficult machinery. By late 1944, the pressure on him was extreme. He had to take a large, noisy boat through waters heavily controlled by the Allies, while also protecting the success of Operation Caesar, a mission tied to transferring critical technology to Japan. Wolfram's legacy is inseparable from U-864's final days, where mechanical problems, secrecy, and enemy skill collided. He may not be as famous as commanders like Prien or Kretschmer, but he represents the professional core of Germany's naval officer corps. Trained, disciplined men asked to do near-impossible missions with fewer resources and shrinking chances of success. U-864's combat record is unusual in the history of Germany's U-boat force. Unlike the famous Grey Wolves that hunted Allied convoys in the Atlantic, U-864 was not built for sinking many ships. Its entire wartime mission was focused on one high-risk operation, Operation Caesar. By late 1944, Germany and Japan were cut off from each other, and Allied control of the seas made normal transport almost impossible. Operation Caesar aimed to use a long-range U-boat to carry key war materials and technology to Japan. So U-864's record is not about tonnage sunk, but about what it carried, and the intelligence battle that followed it. After finishing long training in the Baltic, U-864 was loaded with a cargo so valuable it may have been one of Germany's most important single vessels at the time. The main load was about 65 tons of liquid mercury, packed in 1,000 IB-157 iron flasks. Mercury was needed for making primers and detonators for ammunition and explosives. U-864 also carried sensitive aviation material, plans and parts linked to advanced German aircraft like the Me-262 jet fighter and the Me-163 rocket interceptor. To help Japan use the technology, the boat also carried Jumo 004 jet engines and a group of German and Japanese technical specialists. The patrol began on December 5, 1944, when U-864 left Kiel. Problems started immediately. While passing through the Kiel Canal, the large submarine hit the bottom, damaging its hull and one propeller. Wolfram had to divert to Bergen, Norway, for emergency repairs. That delay became a major turning point. While U-864 sat inside the Bruno U-boat bunker, the Allies launched a heavy air raid on January 12, 1945. British Lancaster bombers dropped 12,000-pound tallboy bombs. The bunker survived, but nearby explosions caused more shaking and damage, slowing repairs and keeping the boat in port longer than planned. At the same time, another fight was happening in Britain. The Ultra program had cracked German naval Enigma traffic linked to Operation Caesar. The British learned U-864 was carrying mercury and jet-related technology to Japan, and they saw the mission as a serious threat. This meant that even before U-864 cleared the Norwegian coast, it was already being watched and hunted. In 1945, intelligence and code breaking could be just as deadly as torpedoes. On February 5, 1945, U-864 finally left Bergen again. The plan was to head north, slip past the British Isles, and then make a long transit toward the Far East. But within days, the boat's engine trouble returned. One main diesel began to misfire and vibrate, creating a steady underwater noise that could be picked up by enemy listening gear from far away. Wolfram faced a hard choice: continue toward the Atlantic with an engine that could betray the boat's position, or turn back for repairs. He chose to abort and return to Norway, fearing a full breakdown in mid-ocean. Turning back forced U-864 to move again through dangerous, shallow North Sea waters. By then, the British had sent HMS Venturer specifically to find and destroy it. The period from February 5th to February 9th became the true combat phase of the mission. A tense hunt in which the German crew did not realize their failing engine was acting like a beacon. U-864's story ends not with a list of ships sunk, but with the submarine itself becoming the prize, carrying cargo so important that both sides treated the voyage like a battle on its own. By the morning of February 9, 1945, U-864's fate was being decided by a problem it couldn't hide: a failing diesel engine. Near Fedje, Norway, the big Type IXD2 pushed through rough water while the engine misfired, making a steady metal clanking that carried far underwater. Korvettenkapitan Ralf-Reimar Wolfram thought only about reaching Bergen for repairs. He didn't know that the noise had already been picked up by the hydrophones of HMS Venturer, a British V-class submarine waiting at periscope depth. Venturer's commander, Lieutenant James Launders, was in the area because British intelligence expected a U-boat to pass through. The moment he heard that faint thump-thump, the search became a hunt. For nearly 3 hours, the two submarines fought a silent battle underwater. Launders refused to use active sonar. One loud ping could warn Wolfram instantly. Instead, he tracked U-864 only by sound, sliding into position while staying submerged. Inside Venturer, Launders and his crew worked out a firing solution the hard way, guessing U-864's depth, speed, and course with no clear periscope view, just careful listening and math. On U-864, the mood was tense, but not panicked. The crew focused on the engine trouble and the failed attempt to reach open water. Still, Wolfram knew the Norwegian coast was dangerous. He ordered a zigzag course, a standard defense meant to make torpedo aiming harder. To Venturer, the target's sound kept shifting, but for Launders, those changes actually helped. Each turn revealed more about U-864's pattern and timing. At 12:12 p.m., Launders made his move. He fired a spread of 4 torpedoes, spaced about 17 seconds apart, and set at slightly different depths, like throwing a net into the water. Moments later, U-864's hydrophone operator heard the high, frightening whine of incoming torpedoes. Wolfram shouted, "Alarm!" and the crew tried to dive and turn away at full effort. For a few seconds, escape seemed possible. 3 torpedoes missed, running past or exploding against the seabed. But the 4th hit amidships, near the cargo area. The blast tore through the double hull and split the submarine in two. Even from thousands of yards away, the shock wave rocked Venturer. Launders then heard the deep, crushing sounds of a hull collapsing under pressure. On the surface, a wide stain of oil and debris marked the spot. No one survived. All 73 men aboard, including technical specialists and Japanese personnel, were lost. U-864, its secret cargo, and 65 tons of mercury fell to the seabed about 150 meters down. This fight is widely cited as the only confirmed case of one submerged submarine sinking another while both were underwater. It was a battle decided by patience, sound, and calculation. Launders later received a second Distinguished Service Order, while U-864 became a silent wreck off Fedje. Its mission ended in the dark. For almost 60 years, the broken wreck of U-864 lay untouched in the cold mud of the North Sea, about 2 nautical miles west of Fedje, Norway. After it was destroyed on February 9, 1945, it faded into obscurity, mostly just a set of coordinates in British records. The submarine rested at roughly 150 meters, 490 feet, where low temperatures helped preserve the metal. But it was more than a war grave for the 73 men who died. It was also an environmental danger. Inside the wreck were 1,857 iron flasks of liquid mercury, slowly corroding in salt water and threatening nearby fishing grounds. That silence ended in March 2003. Local fishermen had long complained that nets kept snagging on something, and some even pulled up bits of metal. Using these reports and historical data, the Royal Norwegian Navy sent the mine hunter KNM Tyr to investigate. With side-scan sonar and an ROV, a remote underwater robot, the team found a large debris field. The wreck was confirmed as a Type IXD2 U-boat, split into 2 main sections, the bow and stern, about 40 meters apart, with a crater between them where the torpedo had exploded. Debris was scattered across the seabed. The discovery quickly became an environmental issue. Norwegian authorities found that some mercury flasks had been damaged in the sinking or had later rusted through. Mercury was leaking into the sediment, where bacteria could turn it into methylmercury, a far more dangerous form that builds up in fish. That raised real concerns for public health and for the local fishing economy. Norway now faced a hard problem. How do you deal with a toxic source sitting 150 meters underwater, in waters known for storms and strong currents? For the next 15 years, Norway debated 2 main options. The first was salvage, lifting the wreck and removing polluted soil. Supporters said it was the only permanent solution, but experts warned the hull was fragile. Trying to raise it could tear it apart and release a huge amount of mercury all at once. The risk was made worse by the possibility of unexploded torpedoes and other wartime hazards inside the wreck. The second option was capping, also called entombment. This meant covering the wreck and the contaminated seabed with clean sand, gravel, and heavy rock, creating a sealed sarcophagus to keep mercury from spreading. Many residents of Fedje feared this would only hide the problem and leave a toxic legacy for the future. The argument moved through government committees and the Norwegian Parliament for years. In 2017 to 2018, after long study and public pressure, the Norwegian government moved toward a final plan. A full salvage was reconsidered, but the technical conclusion stayed the same. Lifting the wreck was too risky. Norway chose a large cleanup project focused on stabilizing and sealing the area. The plan used a 0.5-meter layer of clean sand over the most polluted zones, topped with a heavy rock barrier to prevent erosion. More than 30,000 square meters of seabed were stabilized. Before the final cap went down, special equipment also vacuumed up the worst hot spots of contaminated silt from parts of the debris field. Today, the U-864 site is a restricted, closely monitored zone. ROVs inspect the cap, and water and local fish are tested for mercury. Diving is banned out of respect for the dead, since the wreck is a war grave. U-864's story has shifted from secret wartime technology to a long-term environmental responsibility, showing how a single mission can leave consequences that last for generations. U-864's legacy goes far beyond its final mission. It represents late-war German desperation, using secret, high-tech deliveries to try to shift a war already being lost. Tactically, its end is historic. HMS Venturer sank U-864 while both submarines were underwater, the only confirmed case of its kind. Launders proved a sub could hunt another using sound and math, helping shape modern anti-submarine warfare. Strategically, U-864's loss ended a key link to Japan under Operation Caesar. The cargo likely wouldn't change the war's outcome, but it showed the Allied blockade could stop the Axis even below the surface. After 1945, the wreck became an environmental threat, holding 65 tons of mercury and forcing Norway to seal and monitor the site. It also remains a mapped, protected war grave for the 73 dead, a reminder that war can leave dangers long after the fighting ends. The story of U-864 is a chilling reminder of what still lies hidden beneath the ocean. From its secret mission to its one-of-a-kind underwater duel with HMS Venturer, this U-boat remains one of the most unusual chapters of World War II. If you found this documentary helpful, please support the channel by hitting like. It helps more people discover these stories. We're committed to making carefully researched documentaries about the ships, technology, and crews that shaped naval history. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What was the most interesting part of U-864's story? The sound and math attack beneath the waves, or the modern challenge of dealing with the Mercury wreck? Share your thoughts and future video ideas in the comments. Thanks for watching and for helping keep these histories alive.